Hi everyone, I'm Celine from Blue Cala Patterns and welcome to video 2 for the Zabelia Triple Zip bag. You're going to need your zipper facing piece and you're going to cut out this zipper pocket opening. I actually don't need this piece. So you're also going to need your zipper facing exterior piece. So I'm just cutting out along this dashed line. And then on the wrong side of the zipper facing exterior piece, we're going to draw out this shape that we just cut out of the pattern piece. Okay, just like that. I kind of made a mistake here, but I'll just do a straight line when I'm sewing it. Then you're going to need your front body upper exterior piece. Okay, so here is my front body exterior piece, and then if you'll remember in the interfacing video, I instructed you to cut out this shape out of that pattern piece and then cut the shape out of your fusible fleece. So this has fleece on it, and then fuse it to the wrong side. So these shapes should be identical. So you're going to place this right side facing up, and then place the zipper facing wrong side facing up. Now one thing I forgot to do is center marks, so we're going to do that now. Fold this in half this way, and then you just need a center mark along that top edge, like this, and then do the same for this piece. Okay, so now that I have my center marks, I can place this over top. So I'm aligning those center marks, and then I'm going to use some clips to hold that in place. And then we're going to sew these two pieces together, and we're going to follow that line that we just drew and make sure that you backstitch at the beginning and the end. And when you're going around the curved corners, go slowly, and you can stop and adjust the position just to make sure you get a nice curve at those corners. All right, so the facing is sewn to the front body upper. Now I'm going to take these clips off, and I am going to cut this out, leaving about 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then what we're going to do is we're going to clip in the seam allowance at these curves. That way there it'll just look nicer once we press the seams. If you don't do this step, then your curves will not look as nice. Okay, and then we're going to press the facing towards the wrong side. Now, whenever you're pressing facings like this, take your time so that you do a good job. So if you're not really good at doing this part, it's important that you use either the same fabric as your exterior fabric or something that that matches, that's very similar, just to make it a little bit more forgiving. Okay, and then just flip it over, give it a press from the right side as well. Now for the next steps, I am going to mark the bottom center here. I think I'm going to use something permanent. Just because my marking pen does disappear with heat. Okay. Okay, so now that we have this piece prepped, we're not going to install the zipper pocket in here right away because the lining pieces will get in the way of the next steps. So we're going to finish that installation a bit later. And now we're going to move on to the hidden zipper pocket. So that's this one here. So the piece that we've just prepared here is the one that's found right here. So we'll set that aside for a minute. And what we're going to do now is you're going to take your 9.5-inch zipper and you're going to sew your 2 fabric zipper tabs at each end. So I'm going to place one here, and yes, they are wider, but we're going to trim them after. So place one at one end and the other one at the other end. So your zipper is right side up and your tab should be wrong side up. So we're sewing them right sides together. Okay, so now the zipper tabs are sewn and we're just going to press them away from the zipper and then top stitch. So you're just going to top stitch here and here. Okay, so now if you want, you can trim them so the zipper tabs are the same width as your zipper. Okay, so the zipper is ready for installation. Now you're going to need your hidden zipper pocket lining piece. So this is the piece that you're going to need. And first what we're going to do is mark the center. So you're folding it in half, wrong sides together, and then you want to mark the center on the right side along the top edge. And we also want to fold the zipper in half and mark the center along the top and the bottom edge. Because my zipper is a dark color, I'm going to use white. Now in this step, you're going to want to make sure that your zipper opens to the right. So the rounded end here of the zipper pull, that's where the zipper is going to open. So I want that to be pointing this way. Now we're going to be moving the zipper pull out of the way as we're sewing this part. So line up those center marks and then clip. So this is right side facing up and the zipper is also right side facing up. Okay, so now we're just going to base the zipper to the lining piece with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance along the top edge. Next, you're going to need your front body lower pattern piece. And before we sew it to these pieces, just going to see the zipper fold line. We want to mark that on the wrong side of this pattern piece, of this fabric piece. So just going to mark at both ends and then use my ruler to draw the line. This. Okay, like this. Now I also want to center this, so I'm going to fold it in half like this and then mark the center here on the wrong side. And just in case, I'm going to also mark it in the bottom here. Like so. So now I'm placing these center marks together. So this is right side together with the lining piece and the zipper. Just making sure those center marks are aligned and then clip them together. Okay, so now we're going to sew all the way across the top edge here with 1/4 inch seam allowance, making sure to backstitch at the beginning and the end. Now my foot here is quite narrow, so I can do a 1/4 inch seam allowance with a zipper. But if your foot is very wide, you may need to use a zipper foot at this step. Okay, so these are all sewn together, and now I want to press only the hidden zipper pocket lining piece away from the zipper. And then I'm going to top stitch that seam allowance. Okay, so now we've top stitched that seam allowance, and I'm just going to flip this like this. And then I'm going to take the bottom edge of the hidden zipper pocket, and I'm going to bring it up to the top of the zipper. And of course, I forgot to do my center mark, or I pressed it out, so I'm going to redo it because I do want this to be centered nicely. And then I'm going to, so I've lined up the center marks, and then I'm just clipping this. And then I'm going to do another quick basting stitch with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so the lining piece looks like this now. So now you're going to need the front body upper that we prepared previously. And I keep losing my center marks, so I'm going to just do that now. Okay, and then I'm going to place this along the top edge of the zipper and lining up those center marks again. Okay, so now that these are clipped together, I am going to sew across with 1/4 inch seam allowance, and I'm going to make sure that I backstitch at the beginning and the end. Okay, and now we're going to press this away, and I want the seam allowance to be pressed up against the zipper. Okay, like this. And you're not top stitching that seam allowance this time. So now we're going to finish the installation of this zipper pocket before continuing. I'm also going to just press the bottom edge here to create a crease. Okay, so now you're going to need your one of the 11.5-inch pieces of zipper tape and a zipper pocket lining piece. These are the ones that are going to be used for this zipper pocket here. So it's these two lining pieces here. And then again, we want to make sure that the zipper will open to the right. So you want the curved front part of the slider to be pointing towards the right. And you're going to sew these together so they're both right side facing up. You're going to sew them together here along the top edge with 1/4 inch seam allowance, making sure that you backstitch at the beginning and the end. Okay, so now that the zipper is sewn to the lining piece, we're just going to press that lining piece away from the zipper. So the direction of the zippers, the way that they open is really important because, and I mean, it's up to you, but I prefer to have all of my zippers opening in the same direction on the front of the bag. So if you follow exactly what I'm instructing, then all three will be on this side of the bag. Okay, so now with this placed like this on your work surface, so zipper is right side up and the lining piece is wrong side facing up, you're then going to place this over top. And I try to have the edges of the lining piece lined up with the edges of the facing piece, like this. And use some clips to hold that in place. This. I have to pull this out of the way. So I'm going to sew these together. I'm actually going to use a pin to hold this in place. Sadly, I used a contrasting thread when I sewed the lining piece to my zipper. Okay, so now I'm going to sew along the opening for the zipper pocket. I'm going to use about 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and that's going to attach the zipper and lining piece to the front of our bag.
Now when you're sewing this part, leave your needle in the down position and then go really slow at the curves.
Okay, so now I've sewn the zipper and this one lining piece to the body of the bag. I'm going to flip this over, and then you're going to need your second lining piece. And you're going to place this over top. Now, they're not going to be the same length. That's okay. Don't worry about that. They're only a different because of the width of the zipper at the top here. But we're going to trim that so they match. So just make sure the sides of the two lining pieces are matched up. And I'm going to also include the zipper facing into this seam. I think I need to bring this side up a bit. There we go. So you're not clipping the front of the bag, any of these pieces together, just the two lining pieces and the zipper facing, and of course the zipper at the top here. So before I sew these together, I'm just going to trim the bottom edge here. And I can clip those together. You can also use pins if you like. And now we're going to sew these pieces together. So you're going to, first, we're going to sew the zipper to the lining piece at the very top edge with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance and just between the opening here, not past the opening. Okay, so the top edge is sewn, and now we're going to sew up the sides and the bottom edge. So when you're doing this, I want you to start sewing here, close to, as close as you can get to where you've sewn the facing to the front body upper. So you're going to start here, back stitch, and you're not sewing the front here at all, just these pieces here. And then as you're getting to the bottom, you're going to go in on an angle here. So you're sewing on an angle, and you want to leave about 1 inch of space here. So if it's easier for you, you can make a mark. So I want to go up to here and up to here, like this. Okay, so you're starting to sew from this top edge, back stitch, and then sew in towards this 1 inch mark, and then across the bottom, stop here, and then do the same and rotate and sew up, making sure to back stitch again. And then after that, we're going to trim the seam allowance along the sides.
So I am sewing with the front, the right side of the bag facing up, and just kind of pushing it away like this. Now I'm not going to be able to see my marks I made because they're on this side, so I'm just going to put my finger here. And then along the bottom edge, you're going to use 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Whoops, got this part in. So you make sure you're only sewing these two lining pieces together here. And then again, my mark is on this side, so I'm just going to put my finger there.
Okay, so these are sewn together, and we're just going to take off our clips and then trim our seam allowance. So I'm not going to bother along the bottom. I really just want to trim along the two sides. Don't trim too short here at the zipper because you don't want your zipper to fray and then come out of that seam. Just to remove a bit of the bulk. That's it. Okay, so now This is what it should look like. Now we're going to fold this piece. Remember the zipper fold line that we made on the wrong side? So we're going to fold at that. I'm going to start by folding the two ends like this and putting a clip, doing the same here, this end, putting a clip, and then flatten that out. That looks good. Just going to press it. So this is just the zipper fold line on the front body lower piece. And then I'm going to top stitch that folded edge with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so now that top edge is folded, and you're going to need your main body pattern piece. And we're going to use the pattern piece as a guide. I'm going to place it underneath. And even if you want to clip the top here to the pattern piece, this. Okay, and then we want to bring this up so that it matches the bottom corners of the pattern piece. And to do that, folding this part in half like this and bringing it up, and then using a clip to hold this end in place, and then doing the same thing on this side. So I'm bringing this up, folding the zipper in half, move the poles out of the way. So just make sure that those bottom corners are matching up. Let's see here. Oh, I think I need to bring it up just a smidge more. Here, here. Okay, and then when you're happy with that, take that pattern piece away. Oops, I accidentally clipped the pattern piece on the side here. And you're going to just baste along the sides here, just to hold this in place. I like to actually baste from the bottom corner going up, because if you baste the other way, sometimes you push the layers down and then you mess up the position of the fold here.
Okay, so I'm just basting these layers together, just 1/4 inch seam allowance. Make sure everything underneath is laying nice and flat. Okay, so that's what one side will look like. And I'm doing the same for the other side.
Okay, so that's what that looks like now. And you should be able to open and close your zipper pocket inside. Just going to double check before I continue. I tend to be a little bit picky about these things. And that looks fine. Okay, now I'm going to just trim the excess zipper pocket, the hidden zipper pocket lining piece and the zipper tabs. Just going to trim that on either side. So, okay. That's what we've got so far. So now what we want to do, I don't want to see these zipper pocket these zipper tabs at the end. I don't want to see them. And also, um, I don't want this to be loose into the sides because when we fold it over, it might gape open and not look nice. So we're going to take a ruler and a pen, and we're going to make a mark 1 3/4 inches in. And make the mark on the top stitching that you did on the top folded edge. So there's two things that I can do here. It can get a little difficult to sew right to the very end of the line here. It's kind of thick and bulky. So what I would suggest doing, move your pull out of the way, and then sew as close as you can get to that mark and then backstitch. So you're sewing directly onto the existing line of top stitching on both sides. So go as far as you can go and then backstitch a few times to make it really strong. Then what I like to do, but this is optional, is I also like to use a rivet here and here at the mark. So it's up to you. Maybe you're not comfortable with rivets. In that case, just sew in as close as you can get to those marks.
Now, when you sew this part, make sure that you're taking that zipper pocket lining piece out of the way. It should not be included in this seam.
Okay, so that's what these look like now. I've gone in as far as I could towards the mark, and I'm also going to add some rivets now. Okay, so I'm going to use my hole punch first and punch out a hole at the marks that I made. And when I'm doing this, again, make sure you're not including those zipper pocket lining pieces. Okay, so these are set. I should have probably set them a bit lower, but it's fine. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is sew one of our top band exterior pieces to the top edge. And I seem to have lost my center mark here on my zipper. Okay, and then I also want a center mark along. So make sure you're paying attention. There is an angled side here, so the wider side is the bottom where we're going to be attaching this. And I am going to go ahead and mark the center along the top and the bottom edge. Okay, and then I am placing this, so I want the longer bottom edge to be attached to this top part of the bag. So start by clipping at the center and then the rest. Now it can be a little bit difficult with the bulk of the zipper here to sew on the top band. So use a zipper foot if you need to, and then try to get as close as you can to 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, and make sure that you backstitch at the beginning and the end.
So because my top band fabric has a huge amount of stretch, I am actually going to sew it this way facing up after seam ripping multiple times, because I'm going to use the feed dogs to help me feed it through evenly.
Okay, so I am using vinyl, so I cannot press the top band and the seam allowance away from this part of the bag. So I'm going to have to go over to the machine and finger press and top stitch as I press down. So now that we've top stitched along the bottom edge of the top band, the front of the bag is finished, so we can set it aside for now, and then we're going to work on the back of the bag. So now you're going to need your two pocket lining pieces. So you want the exterior piece and one of the lining fabric pieces. Now I didn't put the fusible fleece on the wrong side of my exterior piece yet. I thought I'll do that with you. On the wrong side of the other pocket lining piece, the one that's in a lining fabric, and I'm going to first fold this and mark my centers. My pen is not working. There we go. And then I want to fuse just a small scrap of fusible fleece where I'm going to install a magnetic snap about 2 inches from the top edge, like this. So I'm just going to transfer those center marks to the front. And then I want to make a mark 2 inches from the top edge on the center. And that's where we're going to install a magnetic snap in this piece. And then this one here, we also want some center marks. Okay, so now you're going to need half of your magnetic snap. Usually there's 2 snaps that come in a package, so I only need 1. So make sure you have a male and a female half, and then you'll need a washer for each piece. And I'm using a 14 millimeter magnetic snap. So in this piece, we're going to install the male half, so that's this one right here. So first you place the washer, and you want to center the hole of the washer over the mark that you just made. And then mark two uh, the two areas just on either side, the holes that are on either side of the center hole. You want to mark those and then cut those out. So I usually use a seam ripper, but I put my seam ripper at the bottom of one mark, and then I don't just rip through, I actually push the seam ripper through the top of the mark, and then I just rip that tiny portion. Okay, and then we want to put some fray check on there. Okay, so then I'm pushing the prongs of the snap through those two holes we just made towards the wrong side. Flip this over and then place your washer. And then I use the handle of my seam ripper, my rotary cutter to push the prongs. And then you should cover the prongs with a piece of tape, packing tape, duct tape, whichever you have on hand. I'm just using Scotch tape. Okay, and then you're going to take the pocket lining pattern piece, and you're going to cut out that shape that we've been cutting out of various pattern pieces. You're going to do the same for this one. And then you're going to draw this shape on the wrong side of the pocket lining piece that you just installed the magnetic snap. Just like this. So now we're going to sew this to the remaining main body exterior piece. I have not fused my fleece because I have to do the cutout once again. Normally you would do this in the interfacing section, but I kind of wanted to do it on camera. So I'm just cutting out that pocket opening piece along the dashed line. I've called it zipper pocket opening, but it's actually a slip pocket on the bag's exterior. But for the lining, it's going to be a zipper pocket. Okay, place this over top of my fleece. And then cut this out. And then I'm going to fuse this to the wrong side of this piece. I have threads everywhere. Okay, so the fleece is there and I have no fleece in the cutout area. And you're going to take this pocket lining piece and you're going to line it up to the top, and you want it centered. So I will fold this in half and make some center marks here, top edge. and we know that it's properly centered. And you can use pins or clips to hold that in place. And then we're going to sew these two pieces together, and we're following this line that we drew. Make sure that you backstitch at the beginning and the end. So now, same thing that we did when we sewed on a zipper facing piece, we're going to cut out, leaving 1/4 inch seam allowance inside that line of stitching. And then we're going to clip the seam allowance in the curved corners. This. And then we're going to press the pocket lining piece towards the wrong side. So I do this slowly, a little bit at a time. And I like to roll the seam between my fingers just to make sure that it is completely flipped to the wrong side. So if we didn't cut out the fleece in this area, this step would actually be difficult, more difficult, and it also would not look as nice. Okay, so now that this is all pressed, I'm just going to top stitch that seam allowance along the opening of the pocket. Right, so that's now top stitched. We're going to flip it over. And we're going to place the second pocket lining piece, the one that is an exterior fabric, and place that so they are right sides together. And we want them to be nicely aligned along the top edge like this. And I'm just going to clip them together along the top like this. And then we want to install the second half of the snap in this piece. And I'm going to press down on the snap that's already there, and it should make a mark in the, or like a slight indentation in that second piece. Okay, so I'm just going to lift this out of the way. And you can even unclip it or unpin it if it's really in the way. Then I'm just repeating the same steps that I did to install this half of the snap. Actually, going to use this. Okay, so same thing. Mark the location of the prong holes. I'm going to use my seam ripper, my rotary cutter. Just going to, because I have a small blade, I can just create a small cut. Because with the fleece, my seam ripper is too dull at this point. Then we are going to place a drop of fray check for each one again. And then you install the other half of your snap. Place the washer, spread the prongs, and cover the prongs to protect your fabric. Okay, like this. And then you should see that the snap halves, they snap together essentially. Okay, and then with them snapped together, then I'm going to sew the two pocket lining pieces together. So it may be difficult to see the contrast here because everything is white. So I'm just clipping the two pocket lining pieces together. So the one in the exterior fabric, the one in the lining fabric, and then
when sewing the pocket lining pieces together, sew along both sides with 5/8 of an inch seam allowance and the bottom edge with 3/8 of an inch seam allowance, making sure to backstitch at the beginning and the end.
now we can install we can sew on the second top band exterior piece. Again, I want a center mark along that bottom longer edge, and I'll do it on the top edge as well, just in case. And I should already have a center mark at the top here. So I'm just going to pin or clip these together. Now, since I learned from sewing on the other top band exterior piece that this vinyl is very stretchy, I'm going to sew it on exactly as I did for the first piece, and I'm going to sew it with the top band facing down. Okay, so we're going to sew across, making sure to backstitch at the beginning and the end. Okay, so these are sewn together, and again, because I do not have fabric for my top band exterior, I cannot press it. So I'm going to finger press and top stitch along the bottom edge here with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so now the back of the bag is also complete. Now you're going to take both exterior pieces and you're going to place them right sides together, and you're just going to clip them along the bottom edge like this. Now we're going to sew them together along the bottom edge, and we're going to make sure to backstitch at the beginning and the end. Okay, now that I have them sewn together along the bottom edge, I am going to press that seam open. Okay, So now I'm going to top stitch that seam along both sides with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance from the seam. Okay, so this is top stitched nicely, and you're going to flip it so it is wrong side facing up. You're going to take your bottom firm interfacing, and you can either glue it or you can use double-sided tape. Now I'm going to use double-sided tape because I don't want to wait for my glue to dry. So I'm going to apply a strip along the top and the bottom. Mine is a very sticky tape, so I do not place it where I am going to be sewing. Now, you don't have to sew it in place as well as gluing it, but I prefer to do both for this bag. So you just want to place it centered. So you want an equal amount of space on either side here, and then you want to place it centered this way as well. Okay, and before I press down, I'm just going to measure. So I have three-quarters of an inch of space on either side here. And we're going to press that down, and then I'm going to sew it in place.
And I'm going to use a 1/8 of an inch seam allowance from the edge of the interfacing.
Okay, so that's sewn on. This is what it looks like. I used some a coordinating thread, so my stitching doesn't show that much. Okay, that's done, and now we're going to sew up the sides. So you're going to refold this together. This. Now, what's important when sewing up the sides here is that you want the bottom edges of the top bands to be aligned. It doesn't matter if these are not perfectly aligned. What's really important is that these two be aligned. Okay, so I do those first. And then I clip the rest. Okay, so now I'm going to sew both sides together, and I'm going to make sure that I backstitch at the beginning and the end, and I'm actually going to sew twice at the bulkier area here at the bottom of the top bands. Okay, so now I'm going to sew the box the corners at the bottom of my bag, but first I'm going to trim some of the seam allowance. I don't trim all the way to the top because I like to be able to open that seam allowance when I'm sewing the final step. And if I trim it, it makes it a little bit more difficult. And then same thing for the box corners. I kind of don't trim it near the bottom. Now to box the corner. So we want to line up that side seam with the bottom seam and kind of flatten the layers like this. And again, what's important is to line up those two seams to make a nice corner. Okay, and then I'm going to sew across, making sure to backstitch, and then I also backstitch a bit at that seam in the middle. And then I'm going to trim that seam allowance as well. And I'm going to do the same thing for this corner. So now I can turn my bag right side out. So if you find that your lining pieces are too wide and they're interfering with the bag laying flat, you can always pull them out and sew them a little bit inwards this way. So they narrow when they get to the bottom edges of the pocket, and then trim the seam allowance and then tuck them back in until you're happy. So depending on what materials you're using, you may or may not need to do this. Okay, so that is the exterior so far.
Now you're going to need your D-ring connectors and your D-rings. We're going to start by drawing a line down the center on the wrong side on both of the D-ring connectors. So we want to draw a line down the center, which is 3/4 of an inch from either side. Now, if you're using fabric for your D-ring connectors, you can just fold and press both sides in towards the line that you just drew. But since we're using vinyl, we're going to fold and sew them at the same time. So I'm starting by folding 1/2 in towards that center line, wrong sides together. And I'm going to sew this down with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance from the edge. And then I stop and rotate, and I fold in the other half and then sew across the bottom. And then I fold the other half and sew all the way up to the top. That's what it looks like, and I'm going to do the same thing for the second D-ring connector. Okay, so once you've sewn both connectors, you're going to need your D-rings. And then you just slip a strap through the D-ring. Make sure that the raw edges from when you folded it over, that you want those hidden in the middle, like this. So this is the right side of the connector. Okay, and I'm just going to use a clip to hold them together, and then we're just going to go over to the machine and baste the raw ends together here with about 1/4 inch seam allowance. So now we want to place a D-ring connector on each side seam of the bag. So I like to sew my seam allowance open here. I find it just makes it easier to do the next step. Okay, so you want to place them on the side seam, and you want to have about 1/2 inch of the connector sticking up above the top edge of the bag. And you're going to do the same thing for the other one on the other side. Okay, once the connectors are basted to the sides, we need to make some marks for the zipper placement. So you're going to make a mark 1/2 inch from the side of each connector along the top edge. And we're going to refer to these marks from now on as our zipper placement marks. Okay, so now that the zipper placement marks are made, you're going to need your zipper, your longer zipper, the 15-inch zipper, or 14-inch, sorry. Now the first thing we're going to do is at the closed end, I just want to sew across the coil a couple of times so that we don't accidentally pull off our zipper pull at some point. And then at the opening of our zipper, so we're going to make a mark at about 1/2 inch from the end here, top and bottom. So it's very important that these marks be at exactly the same spot on the zipper tape on both sides of the coil. And then open up the zipper. And then we are going to pinch the zipper tape at that mark and then sort of fold it under like this, and then bring that fold in the zipper tape up to meet the coil. So it's kind of hard to show what it looks like on video, but I'll baste it in place along the edge here. And when I baste, I include the coil part as well, and then I'll show you what it looks like. So you're basically curving the coil so it goes 90 degrees outwards. And then I find it's easier, I use the tip of my seam ripper to kind of hold it in place so I don't sew over my fingers. Okay, so when both ends are basted, that's what it should look like. So it's really important that they kind of curve out at exactly the same spot on either side. So now what we're going to do is we're going to baste the zipper to the top edge of the bag. Now what's important here is that we want the pulls to all be at the same end. So close the zipper and place the curved end of your zipper at the zipper placement mark on this side. So this way here, if I'm putting it here, all three of my pulls are going to be on the same side of the bag. And then just use a few clips. And we're just going to baste that to the top edge of the bag with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now, when you get to the end here at the second zipper placement line, we don't want to keep sewing the zipper. So we're actually going to kind of curve it downwards. And at this point, you should no longer be sewing the zipper to the top edge of the bag. Okay, so this can be a little bit tricky to sew. Okay, so I accidentally pushed my zipper out of the way here. Okay, so I make sure that this curved edge is at that first zipper placement line. Okay, and I'm just doing a basting stitch here to baste it to the edge. I'm going to push my pull out of the way. So I should have mentioned, but your zipper here should be right sides together with the top band. So right now it's wrong side facing up. So I want to start keeping an eye out. Here's my zipper placement line on this side. And now I want to start angling it outwards, or rather downward, down towards the bottom of the bag. Okay, like this. Okay, so that's what this should look like. And what I want to do is on the zipper tape here. So this is where my zipper placement line is. I want to make a mark straight on the other side at exactly the same location. Okay, now we want to baste the other side of the zipper to the other side of the bag. So if we picture it, it's going to be like this in the final bag. So I unzip it at this point all the way to where I have my basting stitches at the end. Then I flip it again. And then you want to do exactly the same placement. So the curved end should be just at this first zipper placement line. And then you're going to want to make sure that at this end, these two marks are in the same location as well. Now, this is the most important part for your zipper closure to not be wavy or ripply. You want it to be nice and smooth. So the most important part is making sure that those marks and the location of the different parts of your zipper are identical on both sides. So this is a bit tricky to sew. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew the areas at the marks first, and then I'm going to sew everything in between after. Okay, and now I'm going to sew everything in between, but I'm going to actually do it the other way because I find it a bit easier to sew it from the inside of the bag. Okay, so this is what it should look like now, and you can close the zipper. So you can see right away if it looks pretty straight or not. If it's, say I have a little bit of rippling, but if you have a lot, if it's this way, then your placement is off and you should try again. Okay, so that is it for the exterior assembly of the bag. In the next video, we're going to do our lining assembly.